Let's talk about Justin Welby. He does crop up from time to time. Suella Braverman has said the government could fail to meet the Prime Minister's target clearing the backlog of asylum claims at the current rate of processing. Rishi Sunak promised in December to abolish the backlog of around 92,000 asylum claims by the end of 2023. But the Home Secretary told MPs the target would not be met at the current pace. It's actually, if the truth be known, impossible. The Archbishop of Canterbury, however, Justin Welby, has also waded into the migrant debate by suggesting that it's neither morally right nor strategically sensible to entrust other countries to deal with the global migrant crisis. So what is our moral duty when it comes to the migrant issue? Let's speak with Steve Valdez-Symonds, Refugee and Migrants Rights Programme Director at Amnesty International. Afternoon to you, Steve.
Hello.
I'm a bit of a defender of Justin Welby. People go, you know, what's it got to do with him? And I always say, well, hang on. Well, two things. Number one, whatever you think of the House of Lords, he's in it, so all the while he is, he has a right to speak. But if the head honcho of the church can't speak, then nobody can, surely.
Well, I agree with you on both points. He obviously speaks from a particular spiritual and moral perspective. Amnesty, for example, takes a less spiritual but moral perspective. As you say, he is the head of the church, and so it would be rather strange, I think, whether he was in the House of Lords or not, if he were not making comment upon something such as this particular subject.
In fact, I would argue that, you know, if you were looking for the sort of top 5 things that an archbishop or a man of the cloth might speak on, and poverty and issues around social issues, etc., then this would probably be in there. Again, it doesn't matter whether we agree with him, but I think his right to say it should be certainly protected. But let's look, Steve, at what he's saying here about the moral right. You used the M word then when describing Amnesty's position. It's a moral position. Some people do take issue with that and say, well, you know, why is it more moral to take more people when there are other issues that could be described as even more moral to address? It's a conundrum, but what's the answer to that?
Well, I suppose the starting point is to make absolutely clear that I'm sure neither the Church of England and certainly not Amnesty think that this is the only moral question for this country or indeed countries across the world. So, of course, there are other moral questions and very important ones that need to be addressed in our politics. Why is this a particular moral question, and why is it that both Amnesty and the Church of England say that this country should be doing more? I suppose there are 3, I would think, answers to that. 1, this country, amongst others, made an international legal agreement that it would do so and that it would share responsibility with others. At the moment, its government is seeking to renege on that agreement. So that is a moral question. To break your promises, this country should not do so. A second way of looking at that, which the Archbishop himself made very clear last night and has done before, and with which Amnesty agrees, is that if the world is going to provide safety to people fleeing conflict and persecution, that is not going to be effective if some nations don't take their full and equal share of responsibility. And it is a fact that rich countries have largely failed over a number of decades to do that. And they have left much poorer countries carrying far heavier responsibilities. And that was always going to prove impractical.
Is the issue, though, really, Steve, just sorry to interject, but one of the things I think people take issue with here, and let's look at the Channel migration. There's only one element to the wider story, of course, but it is the one that gets the headlines, and it's the one we're all very familiar with. I think many people feel aggrieved that the moral card is played by organisations such as yourself, by Justin Welby, in a way of closing down any other debate. A lot of people on the other side of that debate say that, actually, look, the moral argument is it's proven in our duty to Ukraine, to Hong Kong, after the Second World War, various other places around the world. our moral credentials are tip-top, thank you very much. This thing going on in the Channel, that's a whole different area. These are economic migrants. Don't play the moral card when we're talking about a very different story.
Well, I'm sorry, but the facts of the matter don't bear that response out. The fact is that the people who have been seeking asylum over the last few years, including by small boats across the Channel, have, as all the data shows, when their claims, if their claims are ever considered, are on the whole, not all, but on the whole, entitled to asylum. And the data also shows very consistently over many years that the number of people who ever come, whether by small boat or any other means, to this country remains relatively small.
Isn't the reason behind that, though, Steve, and this is certainly, and I'm putting this to you just simply as the arguments seem to manifest, is that so around about 70-odd%, you're correct, are given the green light, as it were. So many would say, well, that's clearly, at the very least, 2/3 of people are legit, even if you say. However, people can take issue with that as well and say, no, actually, this isn't true, because what happens, and everybody knows it's not true, because you come over, but you've given somebody £5,000, you've come across several countries, you just simply do not do that. If you're escaping tyranny and destitute, you just don't do it. Whatever the rights and wrongs of sharing the responsibility, if you're that desperate, you stop where you first feel safe. So people aren't buying it, but they also know that when you get to Border Force and you have those interviews that we are told are very lackadaisical in terms of their kind of length or the integrity of them, then claiming that, I don't know, I'm a Christian in a Muslim country, I'm gay, bisexual, trans, whatever, throw that card in and you will get the green light.
Well, you've made 2 points there. I'll try and deal with them both as succinctly as possible. I'll say just a short thing about the second of those points. I don't now, but I have worked in our asylum system. I used to be a legal representative of people going through our asylum system, right from the first initial stages all the way up to appeals in relation to it. I am very familiar with the fact that the interviews that people go through, both with the Home Office and in the appeals system, often more than one interview being demanded of them, are anything but lackadaisical. And the skepticism that many people receive in those interviews is profound. So, no, it is no small thing to...
Wait, it should be, right? I mean, it absolutely should be as profound and sceptical as humanly possible, surely. That's the moral thing to do, isn't it? Your starting position is a blank sheet of paper. You have no judgment on the person on the other side of the table, so you are going to, devil's advocate style, you will know this as a lawyer, you will throw all of those curveballs and difficult, challenging questions and scenarios to the person. I mean, after all, they're asking literally to move into your country. That should be thorough.
Well, it certainly should be a thorough inquiry. I don't quite agree with you about how it should be conducted, but let's pause and remember the way in which you put the question, on behalf, I understand, of your listeners and viewers, to me. Your question began with the idea that this process is lackadaisical. All I'm saying to you, it is very far from it.
I think my point number, where we've only got about 20 seconds, Steve, if you can manage this, but the fact that we have a shortage of staff at Border Force as well, there's another issue. There should be 100 times more people working in those kind of roles, and those involved in this means that it's probably easier now than ever before to get the stamp of approval.
Well, that is clearly not the case with what is happening at the moment. And the big issue, which I know I've spoken to you about before, is that the government ministers have bizarrely decided to stop processing many, many, many people's claims. That is why the system is now in such a mess and we have such huge backlogs, because far too many people have not had any opportunity to get through the system successfully or otherwise, simply because ministers have refused that.